For 3,000 years, the galaxy had known peace. The Galactic Council had ensured order. Empires had settled their wars. And humanity. They had thrived, quietly, carefully, never showing aggression. The other species saw them as strange, advanced, but peaceful, powerful, yet silent. Humans had no interest in war, no desire for conquest. The Zorvax Dominion saw this as weakness, and they decided it was time to strike. The attack begins. The Zorvax fleet appeared over Nova Prime, one of humanity's largest outer colonies. Massive warships, black as night, cast shadows over the planet. Their weapons glowed with deadly energy. On the surface, people looked up in horror. Nova Prime had no defenses. It didn't need them. The Galactic Council had guaranteed peace for 3 millennia. No one had dared break that agreement. Until now. The first Zorvax command ship sent a message. A deep, rumbling voice echoed through the colony's communication systems. Humans, your time in the stars is over. The Dominion takes what it wants, and we want everything. Then the attack began. Fire and ash. The first strike came from orbit. Blazing energy beams rained down from the sky, cutting through skyscrapers, melting streets, and turning cities into firestorms. People screamed as the ground shook beneath them. Entire districts were wiped out in seconds. The sky burned. Survivors ran, but there was nowhere to go. The Zorvax landed next. Thousands of armored warriors stormed the ruins, weapons cutting down anyone they found. This wasn't just an invasion. It was extermination. The Zorvax laughed as they crushed human resistance. They had expected a fight, but there was none. The humans had no armies, no warships, just civilians and unarmed patrol forces. It was almost too easy. The Galactic Council watches. In the distant core worlds, the Galactic Council gathered in emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species stared at the screen, watching Nova Prime burn. For thousands of years, war had been forbidden. Peace had ruled the stars. But now, that peace was over. An Uldari ambassador, his silver eyes filled with concern, turned to the Zorvax representative. Stop this madness. You know humanity will retaliate. The Zorvax grinned. Retaliate? Against us. They have no army, no war fleets. They are soft. They are weak. And soon they will be gone. A deep silence filled the chamber. Everyone knew the truth. Humanity had never needed an army. They had never built war fleets. Because for 3,000 years, they had never been attacked. No one knew what would happen next. The last transmission. Back on Nova Prime, the last survivors huddled in an underground bunker. The planet was lost. The Zorvax marched through the streets, laughing as they slaughtered the last defenders. But in a secret chamber, one final transmission was sent. A desperate message to Earth. A single sentence. We are under attack. Then, silence. The Zorvax ships blocked all further transmissions. No distress calls. No warnings. No escape. To the rest of the galaxy, humanity had gone silent. And the Zorvax celebrated. They had just won the first strike. They thought humans were afraid. They thought no one would fight back. They had no idea what was coming. The attack on Nova Prime was over. The Zorvax Dominion had won. The colony lay in ruins, its cities reduced to smoking craters. Millions of humans were dead. The few survivors were either enslaved or hunted down for sport. The Zorvax fleet hovered above the burning world, their commander satisfied. One of their warlords, General Varrock, stood aboard his flagship, watching the destruction unfold. He sneered. Humans are pathetic. For years, the Dominion had feared humanity's potential, their rapid growth, their technology. But now, they were nothing. No military, no resistance. Varrock turned to his officers. Prepare the fleet. We strike the next colony. The great extermination had begun. Or so they thought. The galaxy reacts. News of the massacre spread quickly. Across the stars, billions watched in shock as images of Nova Prime's destruction flooded galactic networks. Burned cities, dead civilians, Zorvax war banners flying over human ruins. The Galactic Council held an emergency meeting. Ambassadors from hundreds of species argued, shouted, demanded action. But there was a problem. No one had heard from Earth. No distress signals. No retaliation. No demands for war. Just silence. The Council tried to contact human representatives. No response. The Uldari ambassador, one of humanity's closest allies, leaned forward. This isn't right. The humans should be fighting back. The Zorvax ambassador scoffed. Fighting back. They are hiding. Their weakness is exposed for all to see. The Council fell into uneasy silence. For 3,000 years, humanity had been peaceful, but no one had ever asked why. And now, with Earth silent, an unsettling fear crept through the chamber. Had the Zorvax just made a terrible mistake? The next attack. With no response from Earth, the Zorvax grew bold. Their fleet jumped to the next human colony, New Horizon. Another undefended world. Another easy conquest. But as they arrived, something felt different. The planet's surface was dark. No lights. No transmissions. No signs of life. General Varrock frowned. Where is everyone? His ships scanned the planet. They found no heat signatures, no human ships, no defenses. It was empty. Varrock growled. They ran. Cowards. Then one of his officers spoke, his voice shaky. Sir, something is wrong. Varrock turned. What? The officer hesitated, then displayed a hacked transmission log. It was a message from Earth, sent to every human colony. It contained only 4 words. Evacuate. Go into hiding. Varrock felt a chill run through his spine. The humans hadn't abandoned their people. They had planned for this. The silence deepens. One by one, the Zorvax attacked more human worlds. And one by one, they found the same thing. Nothing. Empty cities, abandoned homes, dead signals. It was as if humanity had vanished. The Zorvax kept pushing forward, deeper into human space. Each time they thought they had found an easy target, they arrived to find a ghost town. There were no prisoners to take, no civilians to kill, just silence. It wasn't a retreat. It wasn't surrender. It was something far worse. The humans were waiting, watching, preparing. The Zorvax had no idea what was coming next. The Zorvax Dominion was confused. Their war fleets had crushed human colonies with ease. They had expected fear, desperation, surrender. Instead, they got silence. Every human world they invaded was empty. No civilians, no soldiers, no defenses. It was as if humanity had vanished. But General Varrock wasn't worried. It doesn't matter, he growled. They can't hide forever. We will find Earth and burn it to the ground. He ordered the fleet to advance. And that was when everything changed. The ambush. The Zorvax Third Fleet, over 300 warships, jumped to the next human system. Their target, Mars. It was supposed to be an easy conquest, a stepping stone to Earth. But the moment they arrived, their ship's systems started failing. Sir, our long-range scanners just shut down. Weapons are offline. Our engines. Blackness. The stars disappeared. Varrock's blood turned cold. What is this? The void around them shifted, twisted. Then, the sky exploded. From the darkness, massive shapes emerged. They were unlike anything the Zorvax had ever seen. Dreadnoughts. Titanic warships, larger than anything in the Dominion fleet. Their hulls were black, covered in glowing lines of energy. They had no insignias, no markings. They moved with impossible speed. And then, they opened fire. The Zorvax learned fear. The first wave of destruction was instant. The leading Zorvax battleships vanished in a storm of white-hot beams. Their shields meant nothing. Their armor meant nothing. One by one, the mighty Zorvax warships fell. Varrock watched in horror as his fleet was ripped apart. Re-to-re-at, he roared. Get us out of here. But there was nowhere to go. The human dreadnoughts jammed their warp drives. They were trapped. And then, for the first time in Zorvax history, they begged for mercy. Varrock opened a channel. His voice shook. Humans, we surrender. The response was cold, unfeeling. A single human voice, calm and emotionless, spoke through the Zorvax command ship speakers. You do not understand. Varrock swallowed hard. Tell you what? The human's voice was like steel. This is not a war. This is a correction. Then, the transmission cut off. And the killing continued. The Zorvax finally understand. By the time the battle was over, only one Zorvax warship remained. General Varrock's flagship. The rest of his fleet, destroyed. The human dreadnoughts didn't pursue. They simply watched. As if saying, go, tell them what you've seen. Shaking, defeated, Varrock fled. For the first time in his life, he felt true fear. The Zorvax thought humanity was weak. They thought they were prey. But now, Varrock knew the truth. The humans had never needed an army. Because when they finally built one, it was unstoppable. And the war was far from over. The Zorvax Dominion was no longer celebrating. General Varrock sat in the command chamber of his warship, staring at the ruined remains of his once mighty fleet. The survivors, those few who had managed to escape the massacre at Mars, were silent. There were no cheers of victory, no war cries, only the cold realization that they had made a mistake, an irreversible mistake. The humans were not weak. They had never been weak. They had simply never needed to fight before. And now, when they finally did, they fought like something beyond mere soldiers. Their warships had appeared from the void itself. Their weapons had torn through Zorvax defenses as if they were nothing. And their strategy had been something terrifyingly precise. The Dominion had fought countless wars, conquered hundreds of civilizations, but never, never had they faced something like this. The words of the human commander echoed in Varrock's mind. This is not a war. This is a correction. What did that mean? Was humanity simply erasing them, wiping the Zorvax from existence like an error in a system? He clenched his fists, his claws digging into the steel of his throne. They needed to regroup, to plan, to strike back. He ordered his remaining ships to retreat to Zorvax Prime, the heart of the Dominion. But as they prepared to enter hyperspace, the alarms rang through the ship. General, something is wrong with the navigation system. An officer shouted. Varrock's eyes narrowed. What now? Then, the view screen flickered, and his breath caught in his throat. The warp routes were gone. Every single hyperspace lane leading back to Zorvax territory had been cut off. That was impossible. Warp lanes were ancient, stable pathways through space that no single species had the power to erase. Yet, somehow, the humans had done it. Sir, we can't jump to Zorvax space. The pathways aren't responding. Another officer cried out, panic creeping into his voice. Varrock stood slowly, a cold chill crawling up his spine. They knew, he muttered. They planned for this. And then, before his fleet could react, the sensors picked up something. No, not just something. A presence. The darkness of space around them shifted, warped, and from it, more of those terrifying human dreadnoughts emerged. Not attacking, not firing, just appearing in total silence, as if they had been waiting, watching, studying. Then, without a word, the lead human warship sent a transmission directly to Varrock's command console. It was a simple message. 3 words. You are surrounded. Panic spread through the bridge. Officers shouted. Weapons were primed. But deep down, Varrock already knew the truth. It was over. The humans had not just outmatched them in battle, they had outthought them, outmaneuvered them at every turn. The Dominion had believed they were the hunters, but now, looking at the cold, merciless human fleet, Varrock realized they had always been the prey. Varrock could barely breathe. The reality of the situation was sinking in like a slow, crushing weight. The mighty Zorvax Dominion, feared across the stars, was now at the mercy of the one species they had underestimated the most: humans. The silence of space was suffocating, broken only by the steady hum of alarms across his command deck. His officers were frozen in place, staring at the human dreadnoughts that surrounded them, their massive, ominous forms blocking every escape route. The humans weren't even attacking. They didn't need to. Their presence alone was a death sentence. Open a channel. Varrock barked, his voice harsher than he intended. A moment later, the screen flickered, and a human figure appeared. The human was calm, composed, dressed in dark military attire with no visible rank or insignia. Their face was expressionless, their gaze cold and unreadable. "You had your chance," the human finally spoke, their voice devoid of emotion. Varrock clenched his fists. "We surrender," he declared, desperation creeping into his tone. "The Dominion will withdraw." "We," the human interrupted. "No." A single word. Final. Absolute. Varrock's blood ran cold. He had never heard an enemy reject surrender before. We can negotiate." He tried again, grasping at anything to salvage the situation. "We can." "No," the human repeated. "You don't seem to understand, General. This is not a war. This is not diplomacy. This is the end of the Dominion." The weight of those words crushed him. His mind raced. He had studied human history before launching the invasion. Yes, they were advanced, but they were a peaceful species. Negotiators, diplomats, traitors. They'd never sought war, but something had changed. He had assumed their pacifism was weakness, but now he realized the truth. It had been a choice they had abandoned the moment the Dominion attacked. A screen lit up, showing live footage from Zorvax space, his homeworld, his people, and the horror unfolding before them. Human ships had already arrived at Zorvax Prime. Entire cities were going dark, one by one. No explosions, no debris, just silence. "What are you doing?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Ending the war," the human said simply. "But why?" Varrock demanded. "We've lost." "We?" "Because peace was never real." The human interrupted again, their gaze locking onto his. "It was only peace because we allowed it. For 3,000 years, we remained silent, but the moment you decided to test us, you forced us to reveal what we truly are." The transmission cut out. The human ships moved. And Varrock understood, too late, that his species was doomed. Varrock stood frozen as the final words of the human commander echoed in his mind. "You forced us to reveal what we truly are." He had never felt fear like this before. The Zorvax Dominion had ruled the galaxy for centuries, crushing weaker civilizations, expanding their empire without resistance. Even when humanity emerged as a rising power, the Dominion had dismissed them as insignificant. For 3,000 years, humans had remained peaceful, never seeking conquest, never showing aggression. And yet, in a matter of days, they had wiped out entire Zorvax fleets, shattered the illusion of Dominion supremacy. And now they were erasing Zorvax Prime itself. A deep sense of dread settled over him as he watched the live feed from his homeworld. There were no massive planetary bombardments, no fiery explosions raining from the sky. Instead, entire cities simply vanished. One moment, they were there, towering spires, bustling streets, millions of Zorvax citizens, and the next, they were gone. Nothing remained but empty, lifeless ground, as if the cities had never existed. This wasn't war. This was something far worse. The humans weren't just destroying the Dominion. They were erasing it. His officers trembled around him, their claws gripping control panels, their eyes wide with horror. "General, what do we do?" one of them whispered. For the first time in his life, Varrock had no answer. He turned back to the human dreadnoughts still surrounding his ship. They weren't attacking, weren't demanding anything. They were simply waiting. That was the most terrifying part of all. The humans had already won, and they knew it. Then, another transmission flickered to life. A single, stark message displayed across the command screen in the humans' simple, brutal language. Submission or extinction. There was no negotiation, no bargaining. The choice was clear: accept total human rule or cease to exist. Varrock clenched his jaw. The Dominion had conquered countless worlds, enslaved billions, and ruled through strength alone. And now, that strength meant nothing. They were nothing. He had spent his life believing the Zorvax were the greatest force in the galaxy. But the humans had never been peaceful out of weakness. They had been peaceful out of pity. And when that pity ran out, the galaxy learned the truth. The humans weren't just another species. They were something else entirely. They were inevitable. Varrock felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him like a collapsing star. The screens around him continued to flicker, showing the slow, methodical unraveling of his empire. Zorvax Prime, the heart of the Dominion, was crumbling, not in fire and destruction, but in absolute silence. The human ships hung in orbit, massive and motionless, watching as entire cities faded into nothingness. There was no resistance, no fight, no hope. The great Zorvax war machine, the unstoppable force that had ruled the galaxy for centuries, was powerless against an enemy that had already decided its fate. He turned to his officers, his warriors, proud Zorvax elites who had fought in dozens of campaigns, who had once laughed at the idea that humans could pose any kind of threat. Now their scales had dulled, their eyes were wide with terror, their once mighty hands trembled over control panels that no longer had a purpose. No commands could be given. No strategies would work. They were prisoners inside their own warship, trapped by the sheer presence of human power. The dreadnoughts outside remained still, cold, patient. The humans had no need to rush. They had already won. Another transmission came through, and this time, it was not a text message. The human commander appeared on the central screen again, the same expressionless figure that had haunted Varrock's nightmares ever since their first encounter. There was no hatred in the human's gaze, no cruelty, just quiet certainty. "You have one last chance, General Varrock," the human said, their voice as calm as before. "Do you accept submission?" Varrock's throat tightened. He had spent his life on battlefields, had risen through the ranks through war and conquest. He had never bowed to an enemy. But as he stood there, watching the final moments of his people, he understood something. This was not a negotiation. The humans were not offering surrender in the way the Dominion had done to its conquests in the past. No slavery, no occupation, no tribute. The Dominion would cease to exist as a governing force. Their fleets, their armies, their colonies, everything would belong to humanity now. Every choice, every decision, would be theirs to make. But the alternative? He turned back to the screen, where Zorvax Prime continued to vanish, one city at a time. This was not just destruction. This was erasure. Whatever the humans were using, it did not leave ruins or wreckage. It simply made things disappear. And not just structures. There were no bodies, no debris, no remains of any kind. It was as if the places and people never existed in the first place. "What are you doing to them?" Varrock finally forced out, his voice hoarse. The human did not blink. "We are ensuring this does not happen again." The words were so simple, so direct, yet they sent a fresh wave of fear through Varrock's mind. Ensuring this does not happen again. The Dominion had wiped out weaker species before. They had burned planets, enslaved populations, destroyed entire civilizations that stood in their way. Never once had they thought twice about it. But now, standing on the other side, he understood the horror of it. The humans were not just punishing the Zorvax. They were making sure no trace of them remained. Varrock could barely breathe. He wanted to fight back, to scream defiance, to do something. But there was nothing left to do. The humans had outmatched them in every way. Their technology was superior. Their strategy was flawless. Their weapons were beyond comprehension. And worst of all, they had no mercy. His claws dug into the metal of his throne, his once mighty form now shaking with something he had never truly felt before. True, unshakable fear. We accept. The words felt like acid in his throat, but he forced them out. The Dominion submits to humanity. The human commander gave no sign of satisfaction, no victory speech, no gloating. They simply nodded once. Understood. The transmission ended. Varrock slumped back in his seat. The ship was eerily silent. No one moved, no one spoke. The Dominion had fallen, not in battle, but in total submission, and humanity had not even celebrated, because to them, this had not been a victory, it had been a correction. As the human dreadnoughts finally moved, disappearing into the void as effortlessly as they had arrived, Varrock was left staring at the screen, at the last remains of his homeworld. He had thought humans were weak. He had thought their kindness was softness, their refusal to fight a sign of inferiority. But now he understood the terrible truth. Humanity had never needed to be violent, because when they finally chose violence, there was no stopping them.